Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Spirit School. It's a joy to have you here today. How are you doing, Danielle? Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm fantastic.
Amazing. Awesome. So today we are going to be continuing the conversation from our podcast on unpacking weaponized spirituality. We got a handful of comments from that episode on YouTube and Instagram. So I was really excited to see those come through. So what we're going to talk about today comes from a comment that came through my Instagram DMs, and I'm just going to read a little bit of it. So it says, on the podcast, you and the other Danielle spoke about mentors, gurus, influencers themselves as gatekeepers. But what about when students also become the gatekeepers? I've always been open about sharing my resources, giving pep talks to my peers, and having thoughtful conversations around spirit and development. But I recently met someone who holds their development very close for them. For example, won't share who they mentored with, said they worked too hard to find them, won't talk about their time at AFC, the Arthur Findlay College. Honestly, it kind of rocked my world. I've been developing for many years, and I've met some really wonderful people. And I can't figure out if this is just a boundary that they set or even why it's rubbing me the wrong way. I will do some reflection on why this is bothering me, but do you feel that they could just be gatekeeping? So this is a bit of a slightly edited version just to ensure, confidentiality. But I appreciate them bringing this to me, and this is a really interesting topic to discuss. What do you say about it first, Danielle?
Well, I think one of the things that came to mind right away for me is around, well, I'll share a funny thing with my family, which is I had a great aunt who used to gatekeep, and her way of gatekeeping was that if anybody asked her for like her special recipe for making her lemon bars or her cookies or whatever she was known for, she would give it out with a missing ingredient. So no one could ever make them as well as she did. And so I always kind of think of that with gatekeeping, this a bit of like insecurity, a bit of insecurity that comes with this. Well, I don't want anybody else to be as good as I am because I feel that my identity is sort of tied to this. So as silly as that example is, it does feel very aligned with what this person may be doing.
Yeah. When I first read it, the first word that came to my mind was like around scarcity. In mediumship, depending on different cultures you find yourself in with mediumship, there could be a lot of scarcity rooted in what is accessible to you, right? So a lot of the different trainings that I've even done have had made feel like there's only a certain amount of information I can get. And it really took me a lot of unprogramming to realize, like, oh, there's no scarcity to the amount of details that could come through. And so I kind of had to like retrain myself in the spiritual space around the abundance that is available at all times. Of course, spirit is abundant and expansive, but in spiritual spaces, religion, all spiritual spaces, there can be scarcity at the root. We're human after all. So scarcity was kind of coming up for me when I was reading this, but I also have an example of where I have gate kept. And it kind of aligns with one of the comments that she wrote with, like, say, I worked too hard to find this. And my example around gatekeeping, which is probably the only place I've ever gate kept, because in mediumship, I do not gatekeep. My whole brand has been on vulnerability, transparency, sharing everything I know about the space. Like, you don't even have to pay me. I tell people, if you don't want to take a mediumship class with me, go listen to my podcast. I do not hold back. Zero scarcity in my world. But as I opened up Spirit School HQ in Squamish on the waterfront, it's beautiful. And I started hosting retreats that same year. And the years prior to that in the Spirit School brand, I had people ask us and request for us to get swag and to get merch. And I started looking right away because I listen to my clients and I'm like, yeah, we'll definitely get that. I think that's a great idea. And I was getting myself merch from like Vista Print for like obviously like retail price, like $80 sweater, which you could never sell because it's like one of a kind and what I'd charge like $100. Like no one's going to buy a Spirit School sweater for $100. So I was just paying full retail for mine. But for years, you and me spent time researching, trying to find ethical, nice source clothing. We couldn't find anything. Like for
It was such
years.
a challenge.
I told people if you had told me the hardest thing in my business would be finding merch, I never would have believed you. I never would have believed you. But man, people gatekeep in the sourcing space where they get their stuff. Like even the sweater I'm wearing, Annan, like it's a Cree brand, OG Cree brand. I don't even want to ask her because I know how hard it is to find stuff, but whatever, however you source this sweater, good for you. I won't even ask anymore because I know how hard it is. So when the retreat came and we started sourcing cups and blankets and, the swag, because everyone gets like a $500 swag bag for the retreats, we went really high end. We weren't really custom. We sourced through indigenous sources, but I wanted mats. Now I don't do yoga, and I probably never will, but yoga mats are all I could think about. And so I finally sourced these yoga mats and they were disgusting. They stunk. People were trying to be so polite, and I knew that they smelled. Like I got them 2 months early and I Lysoled them. I used like baking soda and like oil. I had them hung over. I have pictures of them, my house hung over them, but they stunk up my house. We had to put them outside on the railings. I washed them so many times for months. I spent more time on those yoga mats than anything else in the retreat, and they were still awful. And so I had to donate them after. And I happened to come across the source for these beautiful white, fuzzy, soft mats. Years and thousands of dollars of research to find these things. And I tell you, I have not told a single soul where I got those from. Not a single soul. And every time I post a picture of Spirit School, like a sound bath or like one of my spirit messages where we're on the ground, I get DMs locally abroad. Where do you get those? And I've never told anyone because literally it took me years to find that. And I don't know, I kind of felt do the work. It's not easy. And it's kind of nice having something that's really custom and something that's like, you know, um, it's not proprietary, but it's like when you think about like a spirit school sound bath, you think about like the white, fuzzy, puffy mats, right? When you go to the retreat, people would always want to be on a chair because it's more comfy. And then I got those white, fuzzy mats and everyone just wants to be rolling on them. So they're like unique, right? So I kind of get that too. Am I a bad person?
No, and it takes me back because I think there's like a sense of reciprocity with things in this area, this space. And it takes me to my early writing days. And you're just trying to make contacts and find people. And I'm 15 plus years down the road now, and people will ask me, "Oh, do you have a contact here?" Or, and I've always been very open. Yep, I'll introduce you, no problem. Always happy to help. But some of the people who ask are people who have either gate kept me in the past, or people who I don't even know. They'll reach out, and that is to me the same idea where somebody that you don't know is like, where'd you get those mats, right? Or asking that beautiful brand where they got that sweater, right? There's a sense of reciprocity that needs to happen. There needs to be, and it's not like a this for that, but even just like a familiarity or an engagement in the community, or not just, oh, I see you did the work, so how can I benefit from it without giving up anything on my own, right? So I think that in some ways, there is a time and a place for gatekeeping in that sense, but I think the intention is where the importance is, because the intention isn't to harm somebody else's business, to make your business better than somebody else's. You're literally just protecting your time and work in a sense, right? So I do think there is a difference when it comes to intention, which is something we've talked about before.
Yeah, and I think, the person who wrote in having that firsthand experience could be the only one that can discern if the intention was gatekeeping because they were protective of their specialness or what the uniqueness that they learned through that experience, or if it was like, rooted in scarcity, or maybe they wouldn't recommend, right? Like there's things I used to be very vocal and like scream from the rooftops, and then people that I referred out to didn't have great experiences. So I was like, okay, maybe I should simmer down on sharing that because my experience may have been really unique. And then, what I experienced because I have a certain level of influence is like when a handful of people do it and they don't feel like they got a good value or investment, then I become way less motivated and inspired to share that resource again, or provide a bit of a disclaimer like my experience may have been a little bit unique. But yeah, there are different reasons where I may not shout out from the rooftop somebody I worked with 10 years ago because their work changed, their focus changed, things have happened. So there's, and I'm not saying that this is specific to the person who wrote in, I'm just saying more generally, like there may be reasons why someone might not want to share, like who they learned from. I had a friend years ago in the space that was really burnt by a few people, and like there was probably a bit of trauma attached to it, where they really didn't want to share who their mentors were because they didn't want us to hop over them and like leave them behind. There was like a bit of a rejection wound around that, right? They didn't want you to like hop over them and just like go to their mentor and like bypass them like altogether. And so, is that right or wrong? Like, I can't say. It was like their protection mechanism around avoiding getting hurt or feeling rejected because that is what had happened in the past. And so that became their response. I've had personally myself, different mentors have pursued different paths around spirituality from born again Christian that didn't want to be named when they found their new path of deliverance. And I actually checked on this before we recorded this. I looked up the name of my first teacher, and there's no connection digitally anymore between them and their mediumship, which is wild because they were just so good and like they were in it for so long. But successfully, it's been about 7 years. Like there's no longer like a tie to it. So, there's certain reasons why I wouldn't mention the name of different people that I've studied with as well.
And I think there comes a point too where, if you're recommending somebody and other people are having bad experiences, there's a point where you become associated with somebody that isn't necessarily up to the standard of how you want to be recognized or how you want to be seen in the space. So I know that, I wouldn't recommend somebody that I didn't have a good experience with, or if I personally didn't enjoy my time learning under somebody, I might not want to talk about them, or I may not want to recommend them, right? So there are all sorts of different reasons, but I do think scarcity comes in so many sort of insidious ways. And one of the places for me, I used to work primarily in the mountain biking industry, and one of my friends, when it was still quite small, and there wasn't a lot of people mountain biking. Now, of course, it's exploded and there's tons of people that do it, but there was a lot of scarcity in the smaller companies at that time. And my friend would always just say, well, let's make a bigger pie. We need more pieces of the pie. Let's make a bigger pie, right? How do we do this? And I just always found that such a refreshing and like reassuring way, because I think we've all felt scarcity.
Mm,
We've all felt it in some way. And it just felt like empowering to think I can do something about my feeling of scarcity.
yeah.
I can create more for myself. I can create more for the people around me. And I think that that is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think that's one of the biggest teachings that I had in my mediumship is, I felt the scarcity when I was first in it because I studied under like a certain culture in itself. And, based off my example too, it probably wasn't the healthiest, but I loved it. And I'm so happy I had it. And I still credit those early experiences for the values and ethics and integrity that I hold. My teacher put the fear of God into me.
Literally.
Literally. Literally. Like I think about an example, and I'd be curious your thoughts on this, but like, after a couple years of training, she'd put down this table in the middle of our circle, and we'd been developing the same circle for years. And she said, put your hands on the table and sing happy birthday. And so we put our fingers on the table and we sang happy birthday, and the table started shaking, and then it lifted up, and she started going A, B, C, D, and like just, and then it spelled out the name Christopher. And one of the ladies who was with us, her name is Kathy, I'm still friends with her. She said, oh, it's my brother Christopher's birthday today, and he passed away like 10 years ago. And
Oh,
then all of a
wow.
sudden, when she said that, the table lifted up like 4 feet in the air, slammed down. And then for the next hour, broad daylight, Sunday at like 11 a.m., for the next hour, we chased this table around her studio. And then when it had finished and like people were flying off, and we were like, it was spelling things and it was lifting up in the air. And it was like, I'd never seen anything like it. And when it ended, I was literally on my knees. And it was the first time I experienced what Caroline Mace would call holy awe. I was in complete awe. What just happened? And she said this was table tipping. Like we had built up enough energy and power together that we were able to create like a physical mediumship experience. But she said, you can never tell anyone about this, or creator, I say creator, but God will punish you.
Wow.
And I tell you, I didn't share this experience for 5 years. For 5 years, because I was so scared that I would like receive some bad karma from spirit, because like I didn't know. I mean, I was still trying to discover my spirituality at that time. And this was about 6, 7 years ago now, but that felt very gatekeepy to me, because for me, that was one of the most spiritually profound, it was still top three spiritually profound experiences I've ever had in my life. I could feel spirit. I felt like I was touched by God. I had never experienced anything so profound, even since, like, other than my Angel of Compassion experience from 2 years ago, I podcasted about, which was extremely profound. This was undeniable. Seven of us in the room. I was like, there's no way I can keep this from people anymore.
That is absolutely incredible. Like the depth of that experience, and then to be asked to, I mean, you were basically asked to gatekeep. You were threatened, right? And that's incredibly manipulative.
Yeah, and it really fucked with me because anyone who knows me, I've been called unhinged, and I've definitely been called filterless. Like I have no filter. So we've even had to record this episode twice because I have no filter. And I'm like, I'm not going down like this, Danielle. I'm not going down like this. Okay. We're going to save it for the book. So I could be known to be unhinged and unfiltered, and I am not someone who can keep things in. If I have to keep things in, I feel like I'm suffering, literally. And I'm like, I don't want to suffer anymore. So I was feeling like I was suffering because I was like, do you know how spirit can come through for real? Like, do you know it's possible? And to make it feel like yeah. I don't know. I don't know. It made me feel all sorts of different ways, but it did not feel good holding that in. I look at things like Scientology, like how, and you have to go up these Dianetics levels, and they keep secrets, or the Masons. And I'm on the Masons Reddit board for the past 20 years. So there ain't no secrets there. Okay. Like literally, but you think about like these little, cults that are out there that have like these levels and layers that you have to get to, and you have to pay to get to and put in your dues and put in the time. How much gatekeeping is in some of these secret society structures? Hey, crazy.
Ex exactly. It's wild. And I think that's, something that comes to mind is that idea of people wanting to belong so badly, right? People want to belong so badly that they're willing to, go against their own values or their own intuition, or just spend more money or whatever it is, because they want to belong somewhere, and then all of a sudden they end up somewhere that like maybe doesn't even align with them,
Yeah.
but they feel like they've got their people, and they want to protect that, so then they become gatekeepers, right? It's very high school clique.
Yeah, it is. And so many of us that are drawn to psychic, mediumship work, healing arts are fringe people. Like we're usually the fringe in our family. I've never belonged to like a big core group of friends. I've never gone on a girls' trip.
Me
I've
neither.
you and me, it's like,
Yeah.
but we find each other and like we talk when we can, like we're lone wolves a lot. Like even in the mediumship space, I was never part of, spiritualism or anything like that, or AFC, SNU, nothing like that, but I like to study it. I've had friends here or there kind of thing, but like never been part of like this big group. But that's something that I've seen. I created the group I wanted to be, the collective. It's like, here's my club, but there's no gatekeeping there, which is how come this person who wrote, I'm like, you'd be a great fit for spirit school, because there's zero gatekeeping where we are, but we don't trash other people, right? Like it's not a dumping ground. We don't talk shit about other mediums. We don't talk shit about spiritualism. Like we don't talk shit about anything. It's just like, how can we grow? How can we share our resources? We have affinity groups where people are sharing all of their medicine. Like even though I run a business program, they still have a business affinity group. Am I sitting here thinking like I'm not going to have a business affinity group in a free affinity group in my thing when I'm going to be teaching business? Like, could you imagine if I was like that? Like, who would spirit trust me with?
Well, and I think, we talked about, or we have talked about your podcast and how transparent and vulnerable and open you are on your podcast, right? So in theory, somebody could sit down if they can't afford the course or they don't want to do one of your courses, they could sit down and they could learn from your podcast and they could put that effort in, they could put that time in. And that's a choice some people may make, and that is wonderful. That may be what someone needs, but that doesn't change the fact that somebody else might choose to purchase a course and do a course with you. And there's all sorts of other relevance for doing that. There's the group dynamic, there's the setting, there's all the little extras that come with it. There's so much value there, but it hasn't stopped you from sharing your information widely. And I think that's, in reality, people are drawn to you to work with you directly. And I
Yeah.
think that's the magic of what you've created by being open and not gatekeeping.
Well, and if you look bird's eye view out in the space and you see these clicks at play, you'll see like attracts like, values attract values, right? Like being really clear and transparent about things allows me to attract people who value transparency. And like that's how our community grows. Like we're 160 now in there. It's like 160 people with like the same value, same alignment. Can you imagine the energy? Like what we can create out in the world, the ripple effect with that kind of generosity. And the number one core value at Spirit School is reciprocity, right? It's like reciprocity. So that doesn't exist here, but it does exist out in the space. I think I mentioned this in this version of this episode, but the scarcity that I felt around this perceived list that I'm supposed to hit every time I get into a mediumship reading, like how did they die? Like what was their name? Like, what was their phone number? What was their address? Like this kind of like list really limited what I was able to bring through because I wasn't open. Like this openness and this transparency in every layer of your life will transpire in your readings as well. Like if you're closed off in life, you're going to be closed off in your readings. Like mediumship is a lifestyle. So there's connections there. There's big connections there. As soon as I opened up to what was possible for spirit and I stopped asking, can you give me the same thing every time so I can like hit this list? And I started praying for diversity and praying for like oddball things to kind of come through, the uncommon things. Like my whole mediumship opened up, right? Because I let go of that scarcity. So, what I really like about the person who sent in this question was that they added a piece in it that was very spiritually mature around, I understand that I need to look at why this bothers me, right? I need to look at like why this bothers me. And yes, do your own work on that. I feel personally it comes down to values. I think this day and age 2025, like where we're at, values is such a core word in our societal destruct and construct, right? Values is everything. And I think all of us are being faced with our values right now.
I think what you said too about this expansion on how you were able to grow your mediumship when you realized you didn't have to stay beholden to this list that had been provided.
No, it was never
It really,
provided. It's just
oh,
in like the subcontext of the culture. I don't know. It just sits there like sticky air that you can feel.
right, right. This is what you have to do, but we're not going to tell you what you have to do, but you better do it or you're
Or
not
you're
good enough.
untrained. Yes.
And I've been to different kinds of mediums, and you know, I do think that there's a type of mediumship that works for me, and there's a type of mediumship that I wholeheartedly believe in, but I don't get enough from it. It's just very fact based, and that's great. And that might be all somebody needs. My point being that there's room for all the different kinds of mediums. Whether somebody just wants to like bring through evidence, that's great. Somebody needs to also be the medium that brings through those oddball things that connect deeply with somebody's heart,
Hmm.
right? There needs to be that variety, and I truly believe that we're drawn to the people that we need.
Yeah.
We're drawn to the people that can speak our language and the language of spirit in a way that we'll understand it. And if we were all one type of medium and stuck in that structure, I just feel like we wouldn't be serving enough people.
And there's 8 billion people on the planet. Everyone's going to have a different need, but everyone has a need for mediumship, but everyone has a different need within that.
Exactly.
Right. So yeah, we need definitely a lot of diversity in this like space. But I was trying to get in the head too. Like I was trying to get in the head too of the person and where they may be at 5 years in and being like, I really want to know. Like I really want to know. And I want to know why you want to know. Because I do remember I was trying to get into that mind because that's what my whole podcast is like, what worried me back then? Like what concerned me? What was I thinking about? And I go to my development journals to look at like year 3 Danielle, like what was on my mind? And I keep my journals just because of that, right? And I have a digital one and I have like 10 IRL. And I really remember because Teresa Caputo opened her show, Long Island Medium, like the year I started developing my mediumship, like 2013, 2012, around then. And I remember really wanting to know who was her teacher. I don't know. I just felt like, oh, maybe I can do what she does if I learn how to do that. And I had somebody who was a peer say to me one time, like, just because you study under someone who can get this doesn't mean you can get that. And I was like, that's
Right.
very true. That's very, very, very true. And I didn't find out for years actually until I bought the book, which I just recommended in the declaration last week, The Gifts Beneath Your Anxiety, because so many intuitive people have anxiety and they could be linked to your intuition in like big ways too, just being like really, really sensitive. That Pat Lalong was like Teresa's mentor. But I don't remember Teresa talk. I didn't read any of her books though, keep in mind, but I don't remember her talking too much about her development, but I remember like really wanting to know. Like, how does she develop? And I remember reading, I mentioned this the last podcast episode, Laura Lynn Jackson, that I was blown away in her book that she just said, I've never been mentored. I just figured this out on my own. It took her 20 years, but she just kind of figured it out in the arena. And she said that she used to feel very envious about the way that her friends and peers would talk about the relationship that they had with their mentors. Like she said that the only thing that she really felt left out of was like that relationship that she felt that her peers had because they went the mentorship route. So yeah, I do remember being really, really, really curious about it. But I will admit, I don't remember why it felt important to me. I think it was more of like just this real curiosity. But I also remember meeting some really cool people because I had different people mention, oh, have you heard of this person? No. And then I look them up and like we actually really resonate. And I've met some really great people that way. So I've seen the exact opposite of this more than not. Yeah.
I agree. I've definitely seen, and to be fair, I haven't gone searching. I've allowed a lot of things to sort of come my way as they needed to in this journey. I haven't gone out looking or asked a lot of people, who they've worked under, but I definitely have only encountered a lot of openness. The other piece that came up with me, that was a big thing for me early on, I thought about the idea of not necessarily gatekeeping, but wanting to keep things close because you're still in the spiritual closet, still not comfortable telling friends or family about it, still sort of like, I don't think that applies to this situation necessarily, but I do think that there may be some people that are maybe a bit quiet about their development because they're not really sure yet how it fits into their life on a broader spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And again, there's so many different reasons like why we're talking about, and you just have to discern the intention. Like, how did you feel about it? Like, I thought about if somebody asked me, where did you develop? Depending on tone, energy, presence, it could mean, is she trained or untrained? Or
Mm-hmm.
I want a piece of that. Or like, who inspired you? Right? Like, there's so many different ways, and that's kind of what sucks about English. It's like there's so many different ways it could be perceived. But I too would look at, like, ooh, this is a hot spot, right? We just talked about this in the declaration last week as like being an ethical space holder. You have to know your triggers. Like you have to know your hot spots and like how to manage them. So yes, if I got triggered by something or had a little bit of hot spot come up, I too would be like, ooh, wonder why this kind of hit me the way that it did, unconscious to conscious now. And there's some development there as well. But I'll say that I feel closest to spirit when I teach and I share. There's something about being open and sharing that just opens you up to spirit in bigger ways. So I really do encourage people, if there's scarcity that comes up, like even if you're a spirit schooler and you're like, I don't want to tell people about spirit school because like I'm there, that's fine. Like if, there's some things that I did that I told people after I left because I wanted to have like a space where I could just be like me the whole time. And then I'll tell you about it afterwards. And so like the trauma of money, like I went through it. I didn't tell anyone I went through it. And I raved about it afterwards. But I'm glad I went through that whole experience by myself and I got to immerse myself in it and then et cetera, et cetera. But I really feel that we are meant to have our experiences, learn about spiritual things, and share and teach. Like in that way, all of us become teachers, and that's how we continue to grow. That's how we continue to expand. And that's how we can sense spirit more in that expansiveness. So it's worth trying and it's worth healing that shit around anything that comes up with scarcity on this path because you will feel closer to spirit when you're open and expanded.
I wanted to touch just before, we maybe wrap up, but I wanted to touch on this one example of tarot and why that gatekeeping has existed. And I think it's outdated now, but I think that it comes from a place of, historically, it wasn't necessarily safe to practice these things, right? Historically, they were things that you hid away, that you only did with your like coven, that like you had these, probably what has now become cliques in some ways, but you had these tight knit groups of people that you could trust, and you held each other's secrets. And with tarot, I think about things like, the idea that you have to be gifted your first deck has been a tradition for a long held tradition. Well, at the time that it wasn't readily accessible or readily accepted, you would be gifted a deck because you had to be initiated into the practice. There weren't, thousands of guidebooks on how to do it. Somebody had to teach you how to do it. Like these are things that make sense, but to tell somebody nowadays who feels connected and drawn to tarot, oh no, you have to sit at home and wait for somebody to give you a deck, or you're not good enough, or you haven't been initiated properly, or you haven't done it this way, so I don't accept how you do it. To me, that is now gatekeeping because that's not the reality we live in anymore. Another example that came to mind is I was very, very fortunate in my life to grow up with an Indigenous elder where I lived, and she was amazing, just so amazing, and so open with sharing her culture. And one of the stories she would tell is her aunties would tell her, if you tell white people what a certain medicinal plant is good for, it'll lose its power.
Mm.
And I love this example of gatekeeping because it was their resistance against colonialism. But I just thought that that was a really beautiful way of protecting their culture.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate you bringing that in. And I know I was interviewed for a local paper a couple of years ago, and I mentioned something like this in the article, like, how in certain spaces I don't share certain teachings and I don't use certain language, and I have to be protective of that and what's been shared with me, and just kind of having this knowing of where it's safe to share and where it's not safe to share. And we're going to talk about a little bit more of this on like the next episode, but I will say within community, within culture, there is a podcast episode on this actually about, is there gatekeeping within culture when it comes to like knowledge keepers in community as well. So I listened to that podcast a couple months ago. It was kind of fascinating. So, but it is necessary because of colonization that there's some gatekeeping around cultural and teachings because everything was taken away, right? Regalia, songs, language, hair. So yeah, I completely love that example.
And one of the things that I really love and appreciate about your cultural teachings is that you always give credit to where they come from. You've asked permission to share them, and then you give credit to where they come from. And I think that is something that you don't see enough of in the world.
It's just, I've always done it. I've never not considered doing that. I'm surprised that that's unique. I get told that all the time, but that's reciprocity. It's like I learned this really such a valuable teaching that I've adopted it into my own. It deserves to be credited to its origin story, right? Like I talk about origin stories a lot in my teachings and like how you can learn everything from an origin, right? Conflict resolution, go to the original intent, original contract. You can fraudulent people in the space. If you go back to the origin stories, it's pretty telling. It was there all along, right? It was there all along. And I think that teaching should be handed back to where they originally came from as well. And so, ending on this note around gatekeeping in the spiritual space, well, there's so much more I would even like to say, to be honest with you. Like I thought about where this kind of comes up in religion and how I think, we see stats around less people joining churches and religion because I think that people are looking for their more personal connection with spirit and their more personal connection to spirituality. And we're kind of like aging out of the times where we have to speak through a figurehead at the beginning, aka this like gatekeeper to spirit, right? To our
Very
creator.
much.
So I think it's a timely conversation and we can see the shifts happening. So, yeah, I guess my encouragement to you all who are listening to this or even drawn to spirit schools, continue to share openly. Continue to share. And wherever you feel that hesitation or resistance, there's an opportunity to heal that shit. There's something there to heal. And your answer may well be this is not a safe space to share this in. And that's fine too.
I think a lot of scarcity comes up with business, and I myself have experienced it, and I have to think, one of the things I've really embraced is the people who need to find me will find me, and the people who need to sit and have somebody else read for them will find them. And I will always, if somebody's looking for somebody to read for them, I will always offer, I might say, this is what I do, this is how I practice. Here's 3 or 4 other names that are wonderful and they specialize in this, or this is what I've heard they're really great at. And you know what? The right people will find you. The opportunities that are for you won't pass you by is one of
Yeah.
the pieces that I have to live by, because it allows me to let that anxiety of scarcity fall away.
Yeah, definitely. To your point, I really love the phrase that came through my heart one day, like spirit is my agent and spirit is my algorithm. And I really do feel that I've had like the sustainability and like the organic growth that I've had because of like the openness and the sharing. And I feel that in some way, the spirit world can trust me with teachings, the spirit world can trust me with people because of that openness. In the business space, I too saw a lot of gatekeeping. Some I understand, like my white fuzzy mat example, that's a business decision. It's not spiritual. It's like, no, like there's a lot of labor that went into this. And I want Spirit School to have something unique, right? I've always had like really customized things. But I know that what I really wanted in the business space was like really full transparency. Like if I'm paying X amount of dollars, upwards 10, 20K sometimes in some of these business spaces to learn from what has made you successful, and you don't open up your calendar and you're not showing me your funnel and you're not telling me about your tech stack and you're just trying to get me to break through a limiting belief or something like that. Like it's just, that's where I saw gatekeeping the most. And it was like the most frustrating for me because there was an expectation of like value return, right? And that's what I would find valuable. So, yes, I will leave that there. But I did see a lot of gatekeeping in the business space. Absolutely. I will say that the most value I've had in the business space is I'm in a mastermind with 3 other entrepreneurs, completely free. We would have never had met each other or known of each other if we had not been in a similar membership. We were in a membership about memberships, and then they had affinity groups, and then we were all in like a little mastermind, and we've been talking for 3 years now. And like one's a big YouTuber, one's huge in the higher ed space, and one's like one of the biggest online piano teachers like you'll meet, like big app and stuff like that. So like moguls in their own right in their own fields. And we have this free exchange where we meet once a month. We have a WhatsApp group and we just openly share everything, our failures. I just attended this event in Squamish the other day called Fuck Up Night. And the whole concept is to share your fuck ups in business and what you learned from them so that we can generously learn from one another, right?
I love that example because I think sometimes gatekeeping can come up around shame, right? We don't want to share what is shameful or perceived as embarrassing, but other people want that vulnerability to be able to connect with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really, really do believe that. So if that's not encouragement for other people to also just share openly, please do, or come join us at Spirit School because that is the vibe there, without a doubt. So, great topic, great conversation. I think next week we're going to delve into my cultural reconnection journey, which I'm really excited about. So, we're going to turn the table a little bit in the topic. I really love this stream of consciousness that we followed for the past like 4 episodes. I still want to hear from people out there on it. Have you seen this come up in the space? How did it make you feel? Has that evolved over the years? Like, I don't think it would bother me in year 10 what would have bothered me in year 5 as an example, right? And yeah, what came up for you as we were having our conversation today?